Hi, friends. Sheila Keeter here. I am the teacher for inclusion. And today we're going to talk about Roald Dahl's 14 ghost stories. And basically, first of all, it's called Roald Dahl's Ghost Stories. So it's a little bit misleading in that I thought it was going to be his ghost stories, that would have written them. However, so you should know that it's not. None of the stories in that book are written by Roald Dahl. Having said that, I went ahead and read it anyway because I'm always looking for spooky ghost stories for students because we know they love them, right? So I went ahead and I did a blog post that reviews all of the ghost stories. And I'm going to give you a quick overview of each story. I'm not going to read it because that's boring and it would take too long. So the first one is called WS, and it's written by L.P. Hartley. And it's about an author who writes stories, and he starts getting these letters, and these letters become more and more aggressive. And basically, at the end, he figures out that his name is also WS because that's who is signing them, the person who's sending him letters. His name is Walter Streeter. And then he remembers that there's a character, a shady, awful, malevolent character that he writes about that also has the initials WS. And so in the end of the ghost story, the person who comes to attack him is actually a character he wrote in one of his books. The next one is called Harry. I think this is a great one to teach in the classroom. The last one is good, but it's a little bit dry and drags out a bit. So if you can cut out some in the beginning, then you could be good. Harry is about a boy. There's this adopted girl. She's adopted by a man and a woman, and the mom stays home and takes care of her. And the mom starts to notice that she's out in the garden talking to someone. And it turns out to be this ghost named Harry. And the mom is really unsettled and upset. She doesn't think it's an imaginary friend like everyone else, including the little girl's doctor and dad. She thinks there's something more to it. So she drops the girl off at school one day and she heads to the orphanage and finds out where the little girl came from. And she came from a family where the dad tried to kill everyone in the family. And the little boy jumped out the window with her in his arms to protect her. And he ends up basically taking her with him. The corner shop is kind of like really traditional ghost story. It's a story about a man who stops into a shop in the middle of the night. It's really cold out, and someone sells him something, an antique, and it turns out to be worth a lot of money. And eventually he finds out that it was a ghost. The next one in the tube is about time travel. So it's about a man who witnesses another man jump off of a subway and onto the tracks and witnesses him dying. But then he sees him at a dinner party and realizes that it's just in a different time period. And so in the end, the man does end up committing suicide. So that's probably one I wouldn't do in the classroom because then you need to talk about the subject of suicide. Christmas meeting is a really cute one. It's fairly short. It's one you may even want to do around Christmas time to kind of mix things up. A person is in a motel room alone, and some man comes and accidentally opens the door and apologizes and says, "Oh, can I stay for a while and talk?" So they're chatting, and he talks about how he's an author and he is spending Christmas alone, and he refused to go home because he doesn't want to interrupt the writing process. And the other person gets up to get some tea, comes back, and the man has disappeared. And as it turns out, on the bookshelf, the man has written about that encounter from the past. Playmates, I'm not going to get into Playmates because it has a lot of sexual undertones that's really bizarre and has to do with children. I could be looking into it, but I really don't think that I am. So definitely I would, if you're interested in reading the story, read it. Maybe you have a different take on it. Nothing is straight out said that's strange, but a lot of kind of weird, disturbing things going on in that one. Ringing in the Change. This is about an older man who marries a younger woman, and they make a really big deal about that because probably these were all written a long time ago. And they go to a hotel room for their honeymoon, and there are bells, church bells playing, and the wife loves it and the husband hates it. And it turns out that the town is calling the dead to awaken the dead, and the dead do come and they take the wife. And it's a fairly good story, but it has some sexual undertones in that one as well. The Telephone is about a couple that's having an affair, and the man falls in love with the woman he's having an affair with, and he tells his wife, and she ends up committing suicide, and she continues to call on the telephone. The only thing I would watch, this would be a fun one to teach, except for the subject of adultery, if you're willing to discuss that. I always feel like you should talk about something when it's there versus just ignoring it. So if you're willing to talk about it, then go for it. The Ghost of a Hand, it's about a hand that keeps showing up in different places in these people's home. It's kind of lame, I think, for our students today. It may have been scary back in some time period. It kind of reminds me of the Golden Arm. But what I would use this for is, it's a shorter one. So you could use it to have students, the ending just kind of drops off and leaves us out, like The Elevator by Roald Dahl, which is one that I definitely recommend. It kind of leaves you hanging. So if you want students, if they're writing narrative, they could do practice on writing the end of a narrative story. Afterward, let's see. Afterward is one that was a difficult read. It was hard to engage. And so I'm skipping over it because it's just a waste, I think, of time. Brighton Road is about a man who's traveling on a road and he falls asleep in the snow, and he wakes up the next morning and he meets another person that's on the road. These are people who are homeless. And he says, I don't know how I survived that snow, sleeping in the snow. And the other man says, well, how do you know you did? And as it turns out, he did not. And these are ghosts. And that's a great one. That's a perfect one that you can do in one class period. And then I have some suggestions here of all my favorites, which include Roald Dahl, Edgar Allan Poe, and some other actors. All right. Well, I hope that you got some ideas from this blog post, and have a wonderful day. Thank you.